دایی یه فرصت خوب حالا پشت مدافع خداداد عزیزی توی دروازه گل برای ایران خداداد عزیزی باز هم روی زمین گشت سردار آزمون و توی دروازه سردار آزمون گل به نام آزمون و برای ایران
بزنه کریم انصاری گل توی دروازه کریم انصاری دروازه پرتغال باز شد علی دایی سهم توپ توی دروازه
یه اشتباه حرکت از قوچان نژاد فرصت داره قوچان نژاد توی دروازه گل برای ایران.
Hello, welcome back to the new Bezan podcast. My name is Arya Allahverdi. Today I'm joined by Sahand Salari and Pezhman Pars. Guys, how are you both doing?
Just hustling. Just fine. How are you?
Good, thank you, Arya. Happy to be back.
So, as you know, today's podcast is going to be about the Iran versus Syria game at Azadi Stadium. The match ended 3-0 to Iran. Before we start the podcast, though, I want to thank everyone who's been supporting us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, as well as everyone who's been supporting us on various other platforms like PersianFootball.com, Iran Sports Press, on Reddit as well. So I really appreciate it. We've really been able to kick on in 2021 and we're going to bring you more interviews very soon, so stay tuned on that. But today's podcast, of course, as I said, is on the Iran versus Syria friendly match. The goals that scored by Kanani, Osman and Kaniman Sarifard. So, I mean, essentially what I want to speak about firstly is about the lineup itself. The lineup was, we played a 4-3-1-2 formation, diamond midfield. Arya Beiranvand was in goals. I think he's not been in goals for a long time. I think the last game he played was against Iraq, so it's been a little while for him. The back four, right back was Jafar Salmoni, his first game for the national team. Khalidzadeh and Kanani at the centre back, and left back was Milad Mohammadi. The three in midfield were Nurlahi, Haisafi and Amiri. And Qolizadeh was supporting the strike partnership of Osman and Taremi. So Pezhman, I want to ask you first, when you saw that lineup, I know initially we posted the wrong lineup. I do apologise for that. That was what was on social media. Got a little bit too excited. But yeah, it was that one. So what did you think about it, Pezhman?
It was almost the best team, you could say, from that squad. I really liked the trio up front with Taremi, Qolizadeh and Osman. Like a really, really dangerous trio. Maybe one of the best in Asia at the moment, I do believe. Interesting to see Khalidzadeh and Kanani back together. They had a great spell in Persepolis. I felt comfortable with those two starting. Haj Safi starting and Wahid Amiri also starting. What was kind of like, I was kind of surprised, wondering what the idea was from that, to be honest. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that later. And interesting with Salmoni, right? That was the least experienced guy who did quite decent. So all in all, it was an okay starting lineup. A couple of changes could have been made, but I'm happy that the coach started with those three up front and showed that the attacking and goal scoring is important.
And then Sahand, of course, I suppose you also wouldn't have been too surprised by it, but I think when we saw that lineup, when you had the likes of Jafar Salmoni at right back, what was your first impressions?
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with what Pezhman said about Salmoni at right back. I thought it was also kind of unexpected because he's been playing left wing for Portimonense in Portugal. He played like left wing back for Sanat Naf last season, so I kind of was a little bit surprised to see him right away at right back, but at the same time, I think the alternatives were Nemati, who was like super poor against Bosnia and Uzbekistan, and you could argue that he's not even like a natural right back either. And then Teak Dari, who I don't really think is really national team material, but who got called up, obviously, in Mohad Rami's absence. So I guess it was surprising, but yeah, I thought it was a good surprise to see a young player with a European experience now trusted there, at least in a kind of backup role.
Yeah, and personally, just for me, I really wasn't that surprised by the lineup, if I'm honest with you. I think Jafar Salmani is someone that we always, in the day, we would like to see play because he's playing in Europe. But the rest of the team, pretty much the same as he's played for a little while now, especially against Uzbekistan. It was basically the same lineup, except I think against Uzbekistan he had Mahrami and Albadzadeh playing, whereas in this game he had Salmani and Beiranvand starting. So it was essentially the same lineup that he played against Uzbekistan, and similar to the one against Bosnia, different formation though. But moving on, the game itself, what I want to speak about. The game itself, if I was to just very quickly sum it up, you look at the players that we had on the pitch, Housafi and Amiri, for me, both of them are players who are now in their 30s. Both of them are players who are probably not natural central midfielders. I mean, yes, you could say they've played there a lot in their career, and in the World Cup, Amiri was a midfielder. But for me nowadays, Amiri is playing up front for Persepolis. Housafi, yes, he plays in midfield for his club, but for me, he doesn't have the energy, the engine to play in that midfield for the national team. You could see today he was very slow to the ball, couldn't keep it at all, which was really poor from a player of his so-called quality. And then you have players like Ahmad Nurulahi. You have to ask the question, is he a natural defensive midfielder? Is he the right person to come in for Syed Tollahi? It's a really big question, that, because Syed Tollahi, for me, like I said in the last podcast, is our best defensive midfielder. And is Ahmad the guy to replace him in that deep midfield role? I don't think so, personally. I would like to ask the question to you guys. What did you think of the midfield, Pezhman?
You make a valid point that if we're not having Ezatolahi, is Nurulahi the man to take his place? Maybe against Syria, maybe against Cambodia, maybe against Hong Kong. But as soon as we play against stronger teams, I think we need an experience, despite his age, Ezatolahi. The experience and the quality that he brings is far more important. And that should be enough for Skočić to bring him into the squad. But he didn't play bad, in my opinion. And I also agree with what you say about Housafi. He had a tough game, in my opinion. He probably had one of his worst games, to be honest, for being against that kind of team. So, and what's interesting here is that this is something that Queiroz started with, playing players on different positions, and it seems like Skočić is taking it to the next level. Like a lot of the players, as you mentioned, played outside where they were used to. And I don't know if it was so obvious to see, or if somebody that doesn't know where they play could understand that, but I think they could at least understand the way Housafi tried to play wasn't good enough, to be honest, efficient enough.
Yeah, and Sahand in this, I don't want to move on the game too quickly because I think we've got a lot to speak about, but I think this is for the midfield discussion itself. In the second half, Omid Ibrahimi came on, a player that me and you really both enjoy watching play. I think he's a very good player myself. However, when he came on, Nurulahi got pushed on a little bit further. He went into where Housafi was playing, and Omid Ibrahimi came on and played as a defensive midfielder. And in my opinion, I don't know if you would agree with me, Sahand, but the game seemed like it was more in control of Iran.
Yeah, just to start, I think more generally speaking about that personnel, even before they started playing, I don't really think that midfield has the required technical ability. I think you talked about engine, but I think physically they might all be okay and can cover ground, but just in terms of their technique and ability to bring the ball from the back or distribute play under any sort of organized pressure. We're playing a Syria team who I think they were rough and hard, and they kind of pressed with some aggression, but it was nothing. We're going to experience much more coordinated presses by the Iraqis or the Bahrainis, not even talking about like a Japanese team or a South Korean team or a team in a World Cup. And that midfield doesn't really have the technique to deal with that. And I think it really was throwing the rest of the team off too, especially those front three that Pezhman mentioned. They really struggled to get into the game like they normally would, just because the midfield was so poor. And I think Pezhman, you mentioned like this was one of Housafi's maybe worst games, but I think he's had a lot of like terrible games in recent times. Just really terrible. He was terrible against Bosnia. He was subbed early. He was terrible against Uzbekistan. And I think, he keeps getting chances and keeps getting chances, and I'm not really sure anymore on what merit he's getting those chances, because in all of these games, if you go back and watch them, he is like almost always one of the worst players. I mean, just his ability to like dictate tempo is very low. He can't really dribble past people. His distribution is weak. So I'm not really sure what he's adding and why he keeps getting, I mean, he just had like multiple bad games in a row for Team Melli. I don't know why we need to play him again. And then just on the point about Nurullahi, I agree with you that I don't really think he's a natural defensive mid. I think his best qualities are actually something we saw sort of even against Iraq in the game we lost. So he can get forward. He has a good shot. He has a good engine. But as a sole defensive mid, I think that his distribution is also weak. And we saw that, how many balls did he try to play over the top today that just to the strikers that were just so easy to read and so easy to pick off and totally, ruined our patterns of play and flow.
For me, it doesn't work. It's as simple as that. Amiri, Haisafi and Nurullahi don't work as a three, in my opinion anyway. I don't think they have the right combination of footballing ability to say that they need to play together. For me, it doesn't work. On top of that, on top of everything that we just said on the three players, the two wing backs or the two full backs, but they were essentially playing as wing backs, so it's quite a narrow formation, so you want them to get forward. So Milad Mohammadi and Jafar Salmani. Jafar Salmani is left-footed. He played as a right back today. For me, now I don't know if you guys would agree with me. This is just maybe from my experience watching football, as is an AC Milan fan as well. AC Milan used to play with a similar formation back in the day. Now, I'm not saying Iran or AC Milan. What I'm trying to say is when you look at that formation, the formation is built around the full-backs creating the width all the time, getting forward, getting wide, getting crosses in, really putting the pressure on from the wide areas. Haisafi wasn't going to give you any width. Neither was Vahid Amiri, because he's also left-footed. The width was supposed to be provided from Jafar and Milad. Was it? It wasn't. Milad Mohammadi was just getting forward and doing nothing. He wasn't really, I don't think he was playing that well. I actually thought Jalali did really well when he came on, Abul Faz Jalali. But I don't know if Jafar Salmani, I don't know what Skočić was thinking. Personally, you could have just easily played take Tari on Mati at right back. Personally, I would have been okay with it. But to play Salmani on his debut for the national team at right back, when he's not even necessarily a left back, to put him at right back, in a formation that requires fullbacks to get forward, for me it's like, come on, man. What is this? You had Daniel Esmaili Fah, who didn't get called up. You had Saleh Hardani, who's a very good right back, didn't get called up. Ramin Rezayan, Pezhman, you love him. He didn't get called up. Why? Why not?
My boy.
Why not? Just why not? I don't understand it. I mean, yes, you can say he has issues with Ramin Rezayan, but it's stupid, man. It's ridiculous. You have to get a new right back.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think that, at the end of the day, based on the squad he did call up, Nemati played for Team Melli in the previous games, and he is supposedly a natural, or not a natural right back, but at least he's been playing right back quite often for Persepolis, and he was very weak there. Tik Dari, based on the personnel he had available, it wasn't the, worst option. And I think Salmani didn't play badly. I don't remember Syria actually having any attacks from that side. I thought in possession he was actually one of our better players.
He was.
But yeah, I think that formation in general, like you say, it definitely requires somebody like Moharrami to provide the dribbling ability and offensive input. But in general, I'm not even sure if he's going to stick with that formation when everyone's available moving forward.
Moving on to the next part of the field I want to speak about is Beiranvand. He played his first game. Last game was against Iraq, as I said before. Pezhman, I want to come to you first. He made a fantastic save in that first half that kept us in the game. What was your impression of his performance?
That was a great save, and I'm happy for him that he had a solid game. He almost made an assist as well, so it was fun to see that. Let me say like this: I have nothing against Beiranvand. I have talked about him before, and I still think that if he doesn't play anymore in Antwerp, he shouldn't be the number one goalie in Iran. But it's good that he at least gets some playing time, because I guess that he will play in the World Cup qualifiers as well. So hopefully getting this game is important for him, and keeping a clean sheet is mentally more important for him than we might think. And having that great save can boost his confidence. And that is good, and it's also an issue, because sometimes when you get when he gets overconfident, when he thinks he's like some kind of Superman in the air, that's where he make mistakes. That's when he make the wrong choices that leads to a goal. Yeah, so I hope he can keep his calm. I hope he can be like the professional goalkeeper that he needs to be, and not hot-headed when things go too good or even too bad.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. We saw that in the game against Rangers as well, where he kind of lost his way a little bit. But Sahand, I want to come to you with this. Do you think with the Arya Allahverdi, come back in the squad probably for next camp, who would you start between the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I've watched most of both of their games this season. And I mean, I think the first thing to say if we're talking about the goalkeeper situation is to just recognize that Beiranvand has probably been one of the most consistent players for Team Melli since World Cup qualifying. I think he had a little bit of some shaky games in the friendlies before the World Cup, especially I think like the Tunisia game, he had like a weak game, or Algeria. But in general, I think since World Cup qualifying, through those games, through the World Cup matches, through the Asian Cup matches, he saved us a lot of times. And it wasn't just like one or two saves. I mean, he had a lot of really great performances. And yeah, I agree with Pezhman that so far in Antwerp, it's been like mixed. He's had, I think, 4 or 5 man of the match performances, and then 4 or 5 terrible performances. I mean, he was excellent against Tottenham, and he was horrible versus Rangers in the Europa League, just to like underline, that sort of inconsistency. But I think that recovering, his confidence, I mean, he's in Europe. I think we saw some changes in his game. I thought he was great with his feet today. He looked really a lot better with his feet. But yeah, I think if he recovers his confidence, for me, he's still the number one. Even though I really like Arya Allahverdi too, and I've seen a good amount of him this season too. I mean, he's been benched at times as well. But I think like that save that Beiranvand made, that's a save I really don't think that Amir even has like the physical capability to make. And so I think Beiranvand might not be playing as much right now, and I think there's even a good chance he leaves Antwerp and maybe goes somewhere else in Europe this summer. But for me, I think he's still the number one, and especially with today's performance, he really solidified that. But if it is a situation where he really hasn't played in a very long time, or he looks out of form in the training sessions or something, then I think Amir is totally ready to challenge him for that number one spot, as he's been putting pressure on him all year pretty much.
Totally agree with that. I would love to see Beiranvand get back into shape and start playing more national team games, but I love Arya Allahverdi as well. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the field is the two centre backs today were Cambodia and Khalilzadeh. We thought Majid Hosseini would start the game, but unfortunately sometimes your dreams can't come true. So we had two Persepolis lads, Cambodia and Khalilzadeh. San, I want to ask you just very quickly, obviously we don't have much to say about them. They played the full game, we didn't concede a goal, but what did you make of the general play?
I've been really impressed actually with Khalilzadeh since he's come into the Team Melli fold with Skočić. I thought he was great against Bosnia and Uzbekistan, and I thought again tonight, I mean, his one-on-one defending in a bunch of like dangerous situations was very good. I thought his passing was good. Cambodia scored a great header to start the game.
چارچوب و توی دروازه. اولین گل بازی رو همینجا می‌بینیم که کنعانی زادگان به ثمر میرسونه. با یک کرنر زیبا و حساب شده کنعانی زادگان خوب میزنه ضربه رو. از تیم سوریه و باز شدن دروازه تیم قرمزپوش سوریه در تهران با این صحنه که در تصویر هم مجددا اون رو می‌بینیم.
But in general they both look solid. I guess the only point that was maybe not as good was a little bit of Cannoni's passing out of the back. I mean, he decided to take it long a bunch of times, but even then I think you can understand maybe why he did that, because like the midfield was really poor, and when those guys are checking for the ball, Haj Safi, Amiri, Nurullahi, none of them are really stable ball carriers or ball handlers, and I could see why a lot of times they weren't in the right positions to even get the ball from him, and so he just decided to play it safe and play it long. But I think on the defensive side of the game, I think both of them were solid. There were a couple clumsy fouls they made at the start, but I think besides that, yeah, solid. I think with Purali Ganji, who is like the leader of that back line, I think Khalilzadeh is cementing himself as a starter in the back four. And then Kanani's a great option to have too with Mahdi.
Pezhman, I want to ask you, on Sahand's point, he's saying that Khalilzadeh has done really well, and he has done. I would agree with it. I'm not a big fan of him personally, but he has done well. But I want to ask you, Pezhman, we have a guy, Khalilzadeh, who's 31 years old now. He's playing in Qatari football. He wasn't part of the national team fold under Carlos Queiroz as much. Do you think he's going to make it to the next World Cup?
Yeah, I think so. I think Skočić have trust in him. I think he's seen him in the Iran Pro League enough to see that he can be there. I mean, Majid Hosseini and Pur Ali Ganji, even when they're fit, they haven't always been playing in club level. They haven't always been playing in the national team. So we can't expect them to actually start in a potential World Cup. Then they need to get more playing time at their clubs, and then they need to get fit. So at this moment, I think Kanani is the number one choice for Skočić, to be honest. I don't know when Pur Ganji will return and how good he will be. And Majid Hosseini, I mean, how many 90 minutes games have he played for Trabzon this season? Like 2 or something like that? Oh yeah, I'm sure you know that better than me.
I think about 4 or 5 or something like that.
But yeah. I mean, I agree with that point. I think Pur Ali Ganji has been always very consistent for Team Melli, and even his game against Bosnia, I thought he was great pretty much in all aspects. But yeah, I agree in general that, I mean, Khalilzadeh, already mentioned like kind of his age and stuff, but I think with central defenders, they tend to mature with age. And we're seeing a lot of the tendencies in his game that were weak, and the reasons why Queiroz overlooked him before, he's really cleaned up in his game now. And we're seeing like a really mature center back. And I think that he's 31 now, and he's playing in Qatar and he's doing very well there. It's not really a high intensity league. So I don't think there's any reason why he shouldn't be, ready in the next 2 years to be contributing to Team Melli.
Okay, so moving on to the front three then. Khalilzadeh playing as number 10. I think he got 2 assists today, actually. I think he got the assist for the corner, of course, on Kanani's goal, and also the assist on Ansari Fard's goal. We'll come on to the substitutes as well in a minute, because of course we had 6 substitutes. But the front three, Pezhman, we had, and obviously I want to talk about the goals that we scored, but when we speak about the front three, Khalilzadeh is a guy who we know is super creative. He's able to control the game from a very important area of the pitch, and he has that quality. But when he has the players behind him not really supporting him properly, and he has Osman and Taremi who he's giving chances to but aren't scoring, what does he have to do? Like, what a player like him, how much more does he have to do to get the team to work? Is it all on him? Do we have to rely on Khalilzadeh all the time, or do we have to rely on different players? Like, do you think it's fair that all the pressure's on him?
Well, this would be a new problem for him, because Khalilzadeh, one of my favorites, he haven't been consistent in the national team. Not consistent in his performance, but consistent in actually getting some playing time. So if he gets some playing time, I do believe a lot of pressure will be on him in a positive way, because at this moment in the World Cup qualifiers, we're supposed to beat these weaker teams, although we have 2 losses against them. But I think it's a perfect opportunity for Khalilzadeh that have been having a lovely spell at Charleroi, being one of their key players in the offensive kind of football they're playing. He can just adapt that and have even better players in front of him with Taremi and Osman, and not to forget Karim Ansari Fard. So I do believe that first of all, I do believe that Khalilzadeh should always start for Iran, because that's how good he is. And I do believe I also think that he should play like the number 10 that he did today, and that's on the wings, because that's what he have done earlier, and he's good there as well. But I think these contributions that he can make, these great passes, the key passes that he can make, and also he have a really good sensitive foot. He assisted the first goal with the corner. So why not put that pressure on him? We need that kind of leader up front that can ease some of the pressure from Taremi and Azmoun getting these lovely passes from him. So
Yeah.
that trio up front is for me the most important thing that Iran have to keep.
Yeah, and Sahand, of course, you're a big fan of Sardar Azmoun. He got a goal today. His goal was, of course, off a counter-attack from Beiranvand throwing it out, getting onto Taremi. I think he missed a shot or it had to hit the defender and it came back to Azmoun and he scored the goal.
بیرانوند خیال راحت توپو میگیره، یه پاس گل میسازه، یه پاس گل میسازه، یه پاس گل میسازه و حالا گل هم میشه تو. پاس گل بیرانوند برای بچهای تیم ملی. نگاه کنیم اینجا حرکتش رو بیرانوند خیلی خوب شروع کرد. علیرغم مزاحمت بازیکن سوریه توپو خوب انداخت. تارمی حرکت کرد، اینجا ضربه زد، گلر برگشت داد و در نهایت سردار توپو به گل تبدیل کرد.
Azmoun missed a lot of chances. So did Taremi. What did you make of it? Do you think that they were being unclinical? They were just being lazy, or was it probably down to the conditions of the match? What was the reason?
I think it's kind of like almost a non-point to talk about them because they're both two high, very high level players who are proving it like every week in Europe now, and we don't have any better forwards. And I think that their record in the national team is so good that there really isn't that much room to question them. But I'd like to instead talk a little more about Pezhman's point because I agree with what he says about how key Qolizadeh is for us moving forward. And since he's been getting more minutes in Team Melli, almost every game he plays very well. But I think that putting all the creative responsibility on him, while I agree it's good, we need to hold him to a higher standard because he's capable of it. I think that just having those three and having Qolizadeh as the primary creator isn't enough. I think you need another player with a strong technique who can actually get the balls to Qolizadeh so he can make the final action. And I think you saw today a lot of times Qolizadeh was coming a little deep, trying to get the ball, trying to start a move, and he would give the ball to one of the midfielders. And instead of maybe taking the ball somewhere else, they would give it right back to him in a dangerous spot where he really couldn't do anything, where there was 3 Syrian players, on him or fouling him. And I think that player for Team Melli is someone at Qudus. And I think that, he's playing central midfield now for Brentford. He's been doing quite well, building up his fitness, building up his form. And I think that actually his combination with Qolizadeh to get the ball to Azmoun and Taremi is the ideal way forward that I see for Team Melli. And yeah, I think that is the combination that we should really try to incorporate more in the next squads. Yeah. I know Qudus couldn't come this time for travel reasons and stuff, but I think that one kind of example that comes to mind is, the years that Arsenal a few years ago were doing better than they are now. They had this combination of Cazorla getting the ball to Özil, and as soon as Cazorla left or he wasn't able to play because of injury, that really affected Özil's ability to make those killer passes and, shine like he had before. And I think that Qolizadeh for Team Melli, if he has a player like Qudus who can actually find him in the right spaces and not like Haj Safi or Amiri or Nurullahi who are, their passing was terrible, then he can do even more and actually, take that responsibility Pezhman talked about and really, make the most of it. And Azmoun and Taremi, I thought, they both missed chances and I thought they were sloppy in possession, but I think that also came from how disjointed the midfield was. They were very isolated up top.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that Salman Qudus is very important to the national team. I was very surprised that he didn't start in the first friendly for Skočić against Uzbekistan. But we know that he is one of our most important players from a technical standpoint. And on top of what you just said, Sahand, set pieces. For example, set pieces, we had Qolizadeh taking the corner on the first minute, Kanani scores, and then sometime during the game, Haj Safi back on corners. Why have we done that?
I mean, that's another point on the Haj Safi kind of predicament that we're in, is that this player has so much experience. He's played so many times for Team Melli and he's the captain. It's very hard for a younger player to take him off a set piece, or, you know, tell him like, no, like you shouldn't take this one. I mean, he took a free kick, terrible, and then he tried to like compensate for that by taking a corner, which he just kicked right to the Syrian goalkeeper, even though Golizadeh had been taking great corners in the game, and Salmani was still on the pitch, and he's an excellent set piece taker. He's the set piece taker for his club whenever he's on the field in Portugal already, after just a few months there. And so, I mean, that's just another aspect of this whole having a player that has so much experience and like notoriety, but isn't really backing it up with performance, is that the younger players who might actually be superior in a lot of things don't really have room to, you know, take him off the ball in certain situations, or, you know, complain to him or so whatnot.
I want to just quickly ask you guys, do you have anything you want to say about the substitutions that we made as well? Because we had Omid Ibrahimi that came on, Abul Fazjad Ali, Kamran Sarifar, who scored his goal, Siamak Nemati, Sayed Manish, and Noor Afghan. Pezhman, do you have anything to say about them?
Just quick, Karim Ansarifard did what he does best. He scores those kind of goals.
قلیزاده حالا این طرف برای انصاری فر با توپ چه خواهد کرد کریم؟ یه سر توپ، یه ضربه عالی، یه گل اروپایی میزنه کریم انصاری فر.
He's like a sniper. He's really dangerous. But one thing I want to say before I forget it, sorry to like change subject. I believe like in the first half of the game, it was so obvious that Iran's tactics was kind of as soon as possible try to get the ball up front to Taremi and Azmoun, and hoping that they will take care of the rest. And that was maybe can work against Syria. It barely worked against Syria, to be honest. But against stronger teams, that will never work. And we lost the ball so many times because of the players were too stressed, and they were like, as soon as possible, they just wanted to give the ball to whoever is up front, and not thinking about doing something else with the ball, or trying to create something that can actually lead to a dangerous attack. It was kind of frustrating to see that was the only game plan in the first half.
It's a great point, Pezhman. It's a great point, because look at the Japan game, and Taremi wasn't actually playing. Now, I mean, when it comes to qualified matches, if you get a yellow card, you get 2 yellow cards, you're suspended. So if Taremi gets suspended, and we've been training the whole time to get the ball to Taremi and Azmoun, that's our tactic. That's what we want to do. That's how we score goals. Then are we just going to say now that, you know, we're going to give the ball to Ansari Fard and Azmoun, or Taremi and Ansari Fard? Is that going to be a new tactic? Because against Japan, when Taremi wasn't there, Azmoun on his own couldn't do anything. Simple as that. He couldn't do anything. And as far as I'm concerned, both of them together, yes, they play well, but you have to have a backup. You can't just go out there and say, these two are the best players, give them the ball, they'll score goals. Because that's not how a team works.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's why it's so important that you have the Golizadeh, the Quduses, you know, there to actually have some solid technical play that Pezhman was saying was lacking, and make some coherent attacks on a regular basis, not just, you know, lofting the ball up and hoping it like bounces to Azmoun or Taremi. I mean,
right.
It's not sustainable, you know. My
criticism of Skočić has been throughout the last couple of months. He's a good coach. I mean, he understands the game well. We can see that. We've seen that in the last 3 games. But for me, he's a good club coach. He's not a good national team coach. He, as far as I'm concerned, has no clue what he's doing tactically for a national team. He thinks he's dealing with club players, because he's doing something that I've seen a lot from club coaches. Is what they do is they rotate their players in a way where they think it's okay, because, you know, I'll play him the next game and he'll be able to be ready for the next game. I'll have Moharami back. I'll have Purali Ganji back. No, you might not have him back. You can't just go and play some randomer in that position because you think he's okay. You need to play the best player. How the hell are you going to tell me that Ahmad Nurullahi is our best defensive midfielder after Said? Or how are you going to tell me Jafar Salmani is our best right back after Moharami? The fact that he's able to even do that in a game that's preparing us for 4 World Cup qualifiers that we have to win is ridiculous. And I'm really disappointed that he did that. Even though it's a Syria friendly, even though this game is very easy to win and we won it 3-0 comfortable, yes, but we aren't preparing the right way. It's not how we prepare for friendlies. Moving on to the next topic, I want us to ask you guys about formations then. What would your lineup be?
I think it's honestly pretty straightforward, especially after that's one of the good things about having friendlies, even if you play bad, is that it highlights where is weak. And I think that it's obvious that if we're starting from the back, I think Beiranvand now proved that for now he should still be the starter. And then I think at right back, Moharami is obviously, if we don't have him, it seems like we're just going to be really struggling there. So he definitely has to start. I think at center back, Purali Ganji, I still think is by far our best center back. And next to him, I think that Shoja Khalilzadeh will be rewarded with his good games. And I think they make a good partnership too. And then left back, we don't have anybody better than Milad, even if he has some deficiencies going forward sometimes. And then I would just play, a 4-2-3-1 or even a 4-3-3 with Ezzatullahi and Ebrahimi, who I think today showed that he's still by far our best central midfielder at the moment. I know he's older now, but he's still our best midfielder with Ezzatullahi from deep. And then I would play with them Qudus, who I think, as I mentioned before, needs to be there. And then up front, I would play Golizadeh at the right. I know, Pezhman, you mentioned that you really like to see him in the 10 role, and I do too, but I think that he can drift around a lot, and he has the freedom to do that even if he starts on the right. And I think that allows you to work in Qudus too, in central role, where I think Qudus needs to be now. And then I would play Osmun in the middle, and Taremi, I would start him to the left. He played very well from the left, slightly to the left, and then joining with Osmun. I think he can give you defensive work there, and that's where he was the best for. Even in the World Cup, he was great from there. In the Asian Cup, it seems on paper maybe we really like the idea of having them two up top, but for me, it looks a little bit like they kind of get in each other's way sometimes in that position. And also, if you play two up top, then you have to sacrifice a player like Qudus, which I don't think we can do given how weak our midfield has been technically.
I would agree with your lineup, to be honest. I wouldn't change that. What about you, Pezhman?
Sure. It was decent. I'm not going to say all the 11 names, but a couple of names that I want to see. Abedzadeh, Majid Hosseini, Purali Ganji, Ezzatullahi, Qudus. Rezaian should come back to the national team.
Do you think he should start over Moharami?
No, probably not.
Okay, so we're going to move on to some fan questions. First question comes from Kiana Zolgad. He asks, should we start a rotated team against Cambodia and Hong Kong to keep the energy levels up so that the big games we have a full team?
Let the best players play. I think that's important. So they need some time with each other on the field.
I don't know the schedule exactly, how many days are in between each game if they're all playing.
I think it's 12
okay.
days. Yeah.
So 12 days between each, or 4 games in 12 days?
So I think the games start from the 3rd of June till the 15th of June.
Oh, so it's 12 days for 4 games. I think coming off a long club season for a lot of the players, I would rotate for the Cambodia game. I think that's fine. I wouldn't do like every single player rotated, but I think that, yeah, like a player like Amiri, we mentioned, like he has some good characteristics, physical, running. I think he can play in that game for sure. Even Nurullah here or whatever. But Hong Kong, I feel like could actually be a slightly harder game than people are thinking. We should definitely win by a lot, but I would go with a strong lineup there, play the best players, obviously, against Bahrain and Iran.
The next question we have on Twitter is from Alfie the Wolf, and he asks, 3 friendly games, 3 wins for Skočić, considering how we played against the teams that were not in their prime. Syria obviously they didn't have Al Somad, and we won the games, but have you been completely convinced by them?
I thought the game against Bosnia was the best one. I was actually quite impressed by our tactics on that night. I thought the game against Uzbekistan, again with this 4-3-1-2 formation, it really wasn't that great, but the players hadn't played it together for a long time, same as tonight, so I think some of it can be attributed to that. But then I think tonight's performance was not at the standard required.
Right.
Yeah, I think we've been over that.
Pezhman, are you convinced by the friendlies that we've played under Skočić?
We won them, right? So I think we should at least bring that with us, no matter how we played. Iran, as we all said, maybe didn't have their best performance today. Still, 3 goals and could have been 3-4 more. So let's see the positive in that, although it's against weaker opponents.
Last question we have is from Nima on Instagram. Nima NIMZZ9. He asks, why does Housafi take long shots and why is he still starting? I love that.
Why? Tell him to Google his time when he was in Frankfurt. He made like an amazing goal. He made some nice goals.
Housafi's problem, right? Housafi's problem is that, though. I've said it in previous podcasts. He just overhits everything. He just takes too much power on it. He just puts his foot right through the ball, and it just, he's aiming to the moon. Do you know what I mean? Like, we might see him at NASA at some point. Come on, like, take some power off it. You've been playing football for like 20 years. You should know the technique of shooting.
At this moment, it kind of reminds me of like Aridai's last 2-3 years in a national team where he was just a burden. It felt like Iran played 10 men.
Exactly. He has scored nice goals, multiple, but I think that it just ties back into this whole idea of like seniority on Team Melli. You wouldn't see a player you wouldn't see basically any player shooting like that on a consistent basis when he has so many other better options, for a pass, unless they're a player of like Housafi's stature who nobody can really say anything to him, and he keeps taking these like ridiculous shots that for a lot of years now haven't resulted in goals. But I think that's the main thing.
Okay, thanks everyone for listening. The next games for the national team: 3rd of June against Hong Kong, 7th of June against Bahrain, 11th of June against Cambodia, and 15th of June against Iraq. So what we'll do is, for the national team matches from now on, as you saw, we had an article put out from one of our writers. We will do articles for the matches. We'll also try to do some of the Instagram lives that we did before the match as well. So if you are following us on Instagram, make sure you stay tuned for that, because we will try and bring on special guests before the matches, as well as, of course, our own podcasts. Also, if you are interested, we are going to try and bring on guests for the podcast during the qualifiers. So, for example, Asian Cup podcast, we had people come on and they were able to give their opinion. So if you want to come on the podcast, just let us know. Also, stay tuned for some more content coming soon. We've got transcript for Arya Allahverdi's interview in English. We have a new interview with Navid Nasseri coming on to all platforms very, very soon, as well as Purali Ganji's interview with Radio Offside to be transcribed on our website. We will be back very soon with more interviews, so subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you very, very soon. Thanks, guys, for coming on.
Thank you, Arya.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice day.
Cheers. See you next time.
Hi, it's Dr. Craig Duncan, and you're listening to the Bezan podcast.